Film with family. They love the family, they love the movies.
Hello and welcome to Film with Family. I'm Austin.
And I'm Zach.
And we are two cousins who like to talk about fission with family.
And fusion. Fusion with family.
Fusion with family. And today we have a special guest, the patriarch of the Zweifler family, as it is right now, John Zweifler, Dr. John Zweifler.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, we've had a couple of your sons already on the podcast. We had Sean, we've had Troy. So it's great to have the dad on.
I'm so embarrassed to say I have yet to listen to either of those two. So something to look forward to.
That's funny. Yeah, we had great conversations with them. So you normally are living in Fresno, California, but today you are reporting live from Ann Arbor, Michigan at our grandparents' house. And Zach, you just happened to be there too.
Yeah, my circumstance is that my power got wiped out yesterday in my place in Detroit from a crazy storm that blew through. So I needed to get somewhere with power to do the podcast.
That storm was wild. I'm sitting in my dad's desk and looking at Angel School, where I spent 7 happy years of my life, and so what goes around comes around, I guess.
Happens to be the place where you, my mom, Zach's dad, our Aunt Rian and Natanya all grew up. And I think the house has been around longer than some family members.
Yeah, over 100 years. Yeah, this is the ancestral home.
Nice. Well, you guys are looking good. You're looking tan. It's been hot out there. You guys been staying out of the heat, or are you diving in, being outside these days? It's a hot summer. Hottest summer on record.
Well, as you mentioned, I live in Fresno now, and there, it's consistently above 100 degrees in the summertime, and they've been, got up to close to 115
wow.
recently. So, yeah, it's rough during the summer. So, actually, I here to kind of help with the family, my mom, and but it doesn't hurt that it happens to be very pleasant here in Michigan as far as the temperature. It's been we've had a very nice stretch of weather, actually. So
yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
Still hot for us, though. I mean, in Chicago, it's pushing the mid 90s, which we are not used to. And so, yeah, I mean, being a doctor located in Fresno during these times of extreme heat, are you having to deal with issues of people having heat exhaustion or anything like that? I've heard that a lot on the news that, it's like actually one of the more deadly things in terms of climate change that is happening right now. And I mean, we will get to the movie, but I mean, heat death is definitely a part of the movie we're talking about today.
Yeah. Well, as you may know, I work with the Fresno County Department of Public Health, and so health education and prevention is part of it. And so certainly, staying out of the heat if you can, making sure you're adequately hydrated, wearing a hat, sunscreen, or all things that you can do to help protect yourself. And certainly, if you encounter someone who certainly they passed out, making sure you just call 911 right away. Someone's acting unusually or bizarrely, then that can be related. You can either be really pale or be very red, very erythematous. Both can be associated with heat stroke and heat exhaustion. So absolutely, it's very real, and you have to take precautions. And
Well, it's a sobering start and a good PSA.
It's a good tip for the summer, folks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty
Wear a hat,
basic.
basically.
I think it's probably all things my mom told me. I didn't need to go to medical school for that one. So,
Yeah. So your role now is it's kind of more administrative, or you're not really working with patients as much, because I know you're working remotely more.
yeah, I'm doing a few different things now. So there was one role that I do have is I still precept residents, and so in that role, you are in a clinic where, in my case, family medicine residents are seeing patients. They then present the cases to you, and you wax eloquent on those aspects that you know something about, and ask questions that you know the answer to. But I really enjoy doing that, and it helps. It probably is more beneficial to me than to the residents, in that it kind of keeps me current and fresh. And but I do find that the just experience counts for a lot. That having seen things before, you're able to kind of have a sense of what's serious and what's not, to a greater degree than newer physicians can do. So that's my main patient contact right now. I also work as a part-time medical director for a medical group, and review cases, particularly in patients who have been discharged from a hospital, and look at how we can best transition their care to make sure that they get adequate follow-up, and help coordinate their services. And then working with the health department, which has been interesting. Did that started during COVID time, so it mainly focused on that, but now trying to address more social determinants of health, and working with homeless populations and justice-involved populations as well. And then finally working at a needle exchange. It's actually a project that started when I used to be a residency director for family medicine. At that time, it was required that you do some type of a community-oriented primary care project. And one of our residents decided he would start a needle exchange for folks with injection drug use. And so they would bring dirty needles and exchange them for clean ones. And this particular physician, Dr. Mark Lasher, has been doing this every Saturday for over 20 years. Incredibly dedicated individual. So I've been trying to help out with him when we can. And just very recently, we set up a program where we're able to provide what we call low barrier Medicaid assisted treatment. So individuals who have a history of opioid use disorder, or alcohol, or cocaine, or methamphetamines, if they want to stop, the emergency rooms are we sent information to the different emergency rooms, and we're getting a lot of referrals of individuals who do want to stop, and I'm able to talk with them and do that through telehealth. And it's been really gratifying. It's worked very well, and I think it has filled a big void. So
wow,
it's been kind of
it's great.
Positive twist in my career. Yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you here, Uncle John. Uncle
Great.
Chili Peppers, as we call you affectionately in the family. How did you get that nickname, by the way?
I'll blame it on Zach's brother, Caleb. And I think it had something to do with going out to the land that my parents bought many years ago. It's out near Jackson, Michigan, and Waterloo, Munich, to be more precise. There's a little lake there, and there's no other houses on the lake, so there's not a concern. The privacy is not a concern, except for those in the immediate family who may be there. And in this particular case, there was immediate family there. And I didn't bring my bathing suit in, but I'm actually a very kind of bland, cautious guy, but for whatever reason, I just happened to have this pair of underwear that had chili peppers on them, and for this particular occasion, I was just going swimming in the lake, So I doffed the shorts and donned the chili peppers, and it was. Unfortunately, it was wrong place, wrong time, and it's been forever.
Caleb saw you, and just your forever Uncle Chili Peppers. But Dr. Chili Peppers, we've invited you here today to talk about one of the biggest summer blockbusters in recent memory, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
One half of the Barbenheimer phenomenon.
Yes. Um, so as of right now, Zach and I have both seen both movies, but we have decided we are going to address these films one at a time. Today with our Uncle John, who is a doctor and has some history with science. And we thought it appropriate maybe to get his take on this film. And then next week, we'll be talking with our Aunt Rian about Barbie. So, and we will be, I assume, giving our thoughts on the whole Barbenheimer phenomenon throughout. So
it's a big moment for movies, and Film with Family's here to cover it. We're on the front lines.
it is pretty incredible how well these films are doing right now.
Yeah, I was surprised how many people were in the theater. And so they showed about 10 trailers, and all of them, bombs are going off and alien worlds and, all that, not movies that I would know, or
superheroes
or Exorcist or this or that. And not my cup of tea at all. And yet Oppenheimer, very different feel to it. But people kept filing in, and it was pretty much full. So yeah, a lot of people are watching a thoughtful movie, which is great.
Yeah, it's not the type of movie you would associate as a summer blockbuster, a 3-hour kind of biopic-y movie
about a physicist.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive that Nolan's convinced people to go to the theaters for a movie like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, me, John, and Grandma Ruth all went to the theaters last night to see an IMAX screening of Oppenheimer, and yeah, it was a packed audience.
Wow.
It was quite a cinematic experience.
What was the feel going into the theater? It was just a lot of people, or were you excited to see the movie? What expectations were in the air? Did Grandma know anything about it?
She knew about Oppenheimer, so she was grumbling from the get-go, and
about
and she occasionally
atomic
let
energy?
out an expletive. Well, just that glorifying war and the development of the atomic bomb, and so I think that was her overriding kind of impression. For myself, I enjoyed it in the sense that, except for as Zach noted briefly, I stayed awake for all 3 hours, which is unusual for me at a movie. It's usually it's such a cocoon kind of place, and you just you just relax and let down all your guards, and so sometimes I'll doze off, but this one absolutely kept my attention. But as we're talking about it, it reminds me that when I was a kid, adolescent, I was interested in Einstein and the theory. I remember getting a book on the theory of relativity, and I didn't understand it, but I tried to read it, and so physics has always appealed to me. Just the idea of equations and seeing your backdrop there. I never got to that point where math goes from numbers to letters. That it loses me there. But it's always fascinated me the way physics, another way of kind of conceptualizing the world, and I think the movie touched on that, and particularly in the beginning, where it was kind of blending discussions and scientific analysis, but also images of kind of sci-fi atom, whatever it was.
There's abstract kind of quick shots that he throws in there. Yeah.
Right. So I thought that was neat to try and give it some kind of physical context.
Yeah. Did you study physics at all, like in academia and college or anything like that?
I took it in high school, and I liked it just because there was if you remembered a few formulas, you were okay. as opposed to, say, organic chemistry, where it's just a zillion things. And so just the way my mind works, physics was easier for me than some others. But again, I definitely maxed out in terms of my knowledge. I kind of hit the ceiling in terms of how far I could go there.
You didn't do any quantum theory or ever dig in that far?
Well, that theory of relativity does involve that, and it's just very difficult to understand. One of the theories that always kind of fascinated me, and they sort of reference it. The author of it is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is, basically that the more you try and investigate something, you kind of distort the results. So you can't. There's an element of uncertainty to what you do, and as an investigator, the fact that you're investigating something actually impacts your results. So it's just kind of a fascinating way to look at it. And in the movie they talked about waves and particles, and it just gets so sci-fi, that something could be a wave and a particle. We don't really know what it is and where it is, and we think of things as being very concrete, and yet there's this all this going on under the surface that we still don't really understand. So
yeah, like the porous nature of quantum physics, where it's like they kind of have that moment where he's like, we're touching hands, but actually there's all this empty space between the particles and the atoms.
Oh yeah, that's with him and Emily Blunt.
It's kind of how he seduces her. Yeah.
Oppenheimer, he's got some moves. He's got some suaveness. He gets some ladies.
Yeah, he's dubbed a womanizer in this movie, but it didn't really seem like he was.
And a dilettante,
yes,
which I guess is another word for the same thing. But
yeah, apparently he only drank coffee, martinis, and smoked cigarettes. That was like basically his daily diet.
He seemed kind of cool. He came off cooler than I was expecting. He's not a total nerd.
No. Yeah, he seems like a cool guy.
Had a sexy affair with a hot communist.
Yeah,
I'll give him that.
And maybe another one too.
Yeah. I mean, so it seems like you guys went there with some excitement and came out feeling pretty good about it.
Well, and part of the anticipation for me is I haven't been to a movie in years, and I really don't go to very many movies, and I'm more watching sports and news and just waste my time that way. But so that it was.
Can you remember the last movie you saw in a theater? Or
it might have been with you, Zach. What was that one we saw with your family? Oh, gosh, see, and I can't even remember that one. Yeah,
what was that film?
It was all of
family.
Us. It was Mark. Mark was there, and
was it pre-pandemic or post?
Yeah, must have been before the pandemic.
Yeah, it was quite some time ago, but we had a good time. So I was looking forward to it. I was looking forward to seeing Zach. Actually, we were supposed to get some dinner, but that didn't pan out because of this huge storm we had. But maybe we can make it up. So.
Yeah.
I really appreciated Zach arranging it and for us to go out together. So Zach, that was cool. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think me and John were positive on it. Grandma did not seem to really enjoy it. I feel she had some negative energy coming out.
Okay.
But she stayed awake. She stayed awake too and watched the whole thing, and she was engaged.
Yeah, you didn't catch her nodding off. And none of us went to the bathroom throughout the whole 3 hours, which is impressive. But we didn't have any concessions. We weren't drinking anything. So it was a very focused viewing. Yeah, I was talking to Grandma as we're walking back to the car. I was like, well, it's great to be able to go see a movie with you, Grandma. It was fun. And she's like, yeah, too bad it wasn't a better movie.
At least he didn't say. At least it wasn't with better company or something like that.
Yeah. She seemed to. I don't know. Maybe she felt like it was kind of glorifying the making of the bomb too much, or something, or like war or something. I don't know. She She just seemed very against everything that was going on in the movie. I think she said.
Well, my parents were both Quakers, and Quakers are pacifists, basically. They believe in nonviolence and resistance to war. And if you are a Quaker, belong to the Society of Friends, then you can apply for conscientious objector status because it's an established principle of the Quaker faith. And
I didn't realize that.
Believes in that and acts on that. In fact, it's in the front yard that there's a sign from the Friends Committee on National Legislation saying war is not the answer.
Yeah, this is probably a good segue. Back in 2018, Zach and I interviewed our late grandfather about a range of issues, and I asked him about his activism past, and he did talk about his involvement in what's called the Physicians for Social Responsibility. And a big part of their, a main tenet, no pun intended.
Another Christopher Nolan movie.
is anti-nuclear war. So let me play this audio from the late Andrew Zweifler.
There was an organization which was national called Physicians for Social Responsibility. And I got involved with that. And that was an anti-nuclear war thing. They developed what was called the Doomsday Times Clock, where the countdown to when we would all disintegrate. And I really liked that. So I got involved with that organization and did some lecturing. The Physicians for Social Responsibility put together a slideshow on the basically on the impact of an atomic bomb explosion, what it can do. And there was it had to do with, there are a few, I can very briefly say that there are blast effects, there are heat effects, and there are irradiation effects. And as I said, I had some control over the curriculum. I pushed a little bit the development of preventive medicine. And I thought to myself, this is preventive medicine. We got to prevent. So anyway, I did do the slideshow, I think, for the students, one class, at one point, the whole class, on the impact of a nuclear bomb explosion. I think that was a two-part thing. What's sort of generally of interest was, it turned out that there were two Cuban expatriate students in the class, and they were very conservative politically. And they went to the dean and said, Zweifler's being political. He's just doing political stuff. And then one day, I didn't know, but one of the senior faculty members at that time audited my lecture. He was there, and because these kids, you know, and I talked about all the medical aspects of a nuclear explosion. You know, like your white cells are completely depleted, and you bleed to, you know, anyway. There was a lot of medical stuff in it, but they saw it as political, and it was a little political. So, my colleague John Chagrin audited the lecture, and I didn't know he was there, and afterwards said, "That was fine. You can do that." So actually, that was an organization I got involved in. I respected them a lot. They've been very, my membership in PSR is faded because other things have come along. So I had to.
That's
nice. That's cool. I haven't heard that audio before, I don't think. So that's cool.
Yeah, it never really came up and didn't seem appropriate in any other context. But yeah, I was reminded when we were, about to do this podcast, I'm like, I think I have some audio of Grandpa talking about his involvement in the serious effects of a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, there was more focus on it before. Speaking of Physicians for Social Responsibility, PSR. So also you asked me if I could dig anything up for this, and actually going through his files, I found this item, and it was a Detroit Free Press clip or a Detroit News clip about a letter that the PSR chapter in Michigan had written regarding the war in Vietnam in 1965. And my dad signed the letter saying we need to stop this war. And the article is a clip from from the Detroit Police Department. And apparently it was kind of like he was under investigation because he was one of these it was a red file,
Wow.
They were keeping an eye on him because he was agitating to stop or supporting efforts to stop the war. So, it's something that he stood up for, and my mom as well, and proud of them for doing that. But just kind of then one of the themes of the movie is communism and Oppenheimer's pro-communist leanings.
And he was being tracked and spied on.
Yeah, so that was not just in the 1930s or 20s and 40s or McCarthy. It's something that has continued, and I'm sure something similar continues to this day. I also was in Physicians for Social Responsibility and did a few presentations as well about the impacts of atomic bombs. And in fact, when I was in Flint, we had a group called the Flint Alliance for Peace. And actually, another person who was in Flint, a few people, one, my wife at the time, Sue Stone, who has unfortunately since passed away, was also a physician and member of the group. And Michael Moore was a member of that group. And we on Hiroshima Day would have a memorial and to commemorate what happened and to memorialize it, to think about the devastating impact of nuclear war, and as a way to remind people that this is real and we need to deal with it. So we're influenced by our parents, and in some good ways, and so part of my life.
And this is one of my main criticisms of the movie, is that he doesn't really want to show you the effects of this bomb. He just wants to show kind of the psychological effects.
He being the director.
Christopher Nolan makes a very, it's a choice not to show the aftermath of this bomb, even the Trinity test and the irradiation effects that were caused in the surrounding area of New Mexico. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people getting leukemia, things like that. And then obviously the on the ground effects of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. So I found that to be a little bit of a political and a problematic choice not to really show anything other than, that hallucination where he kind of sees the woman's skin peeling and then he steps in the charred body. But for all of the time that he puts into the imagery of his films, I guess he didn't want to go there in terms of the actual on the ground effects of a nuclear bomb. Like Grandpa was saying, that your white blood cells get depleted and you bleed out of every pore in your body. And I know it's not a pleasant thing to hear, but I also want to stress the fact that we're talking about an incredibly violent weapon.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that critique. Jen, how do you feel about that? How they choose to show the effects of the bomb or not show the effects?
They could have been more proactively anti-war in their discussion. I think they like the scenes that you mentioned did show graphically the fallout, literally, and they talked about the numbers of people that were killed. And I think one of the central themes of the movie was just Oppenheimer's kind of conflicted feelings about what he had done. So could they have done more to show the dangers of nuclear weapons? Absolutely. But would have been a different movie. One thought that occurred to me was that, for the folks who were there in Los Alamos and watching this, they didn't know either. Otherwise, would they have been anywhere near when that test was going off? Or to protect themselves, and so I'm not sure whether they really understood the radiation effects as they were doing it, but I don't know all the details of that. But and that's what my mom reacted to, was that it wasn't anti-war enough. I looked at it more as more diving into the emotions and of Oppenheimer and how he came to be the way he was.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it has the stance that the nuclear bomb is bad. I feel like that's it definitely is dealing with his guilt and for making this thing, and it definitely feels like there's some impending doom in the final moments of the movie for this bomb being created. So I do think the movie is anti-nuclear bomb, but they could have gone more visceral with the realities of it.
Good way to describe it. And getting back to the PSR, Physician for Social Responsibility connection. So there actually were protests in New Mexico when Oppenheimer was released, because it was 73 years ago. Yeah, so it was 73 years ago that they did the test, the Trinity test, and
as of the 16th, right?
And so PSR,
close to the actual date of the release of the film.
And so Physicians and Social Responsibility held a vigil in New Mexico to highlight some of the exact issues that you're talking about, the devastating impact on those who lived in that area, and that was the other thought, that that Oppenheimer loved New Mexico, loved Los Alamos, and here he drops an atomic bomb on it. So it's
it is.
Did they just bizarre. Not know, or there was something? Kind of.
There is that scene where he's like, "I always wanted to combine physics and the deserts of New Mexico."
Yeah,
and it's like, well, you sure as hell did, buddy.
He made your dreams happen.
Eternity. I mean, I'm sure that zone is still irradiated, right? I mean, you probably can't go to that site, I assume, or do. I mean, I don't know, what the half-life on radiation effects like that are, but
and what they've done or what they've buried or put in concrete holes, like we've seen at some of the other nuclear disasters around the world. So, but that radiation effect lasts thousands of years. So
I'm sure it's still in those sands right now. So, I mean, but this is all to say, I mean, we're having this conversation right now because of the film. So it is good that I think Christopher Nolan is at least putting it in the public consciousness right now, despite maybe some problematic parts of it. But I do commend the film for putting a historical story like this and making it such a huge box office success. I mean, I was just walking around my neighborhood and saw an Oppenheimer IMAX ticket just on the sidewalk, just littered on the sidewalk. I showed Zach and you were like, sign of the times, man.
Yeah, I could say personally, I didn't know anything about this Oppenheimer guy. I knew a little bit about the Manhattan Project, but I mean, pretty much everything that was presented in this movie is was news to me. I knew that they dropped the bomb in World War II as well, but I mean, it's an interesting kind of character or person to investigate. And Christopher Nolan seems to think he's the most important person that's ever lived. I don't know if I agree with that, but it definitely is an important moment in world history. So I think it's kind of cool it's getting under the spotlight. in this blockbuster fashion.
So, John, how much did you know about like this whole history going into the movie? Like all these different scientists, how they developed the Manhattan Project, how they did the Trinity and the aftermath, all the interrogation, communism stuff. Like how much of that did you already know?
Alleged connection of Oppenheimer with communism while he was developing it, and that he potentially was a spy. I mean, that I had never heard that. So that was interesting, and his kind of pro communist leanings prior to that. So I didn't realize that as well or know much about him, but it was, seeing how they brought in all these all these stellar scientists from around the world, kind of like a physics dream team with Oppenheimer and Bohr, and so that was interesting how they put that together. The other aspects that they talked about is that concern about Germany developing the bomb at the same time, and the fact that, and I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware that they were concerned about Russia also developing a bomb simultaneously. And I think it speaks to Oppenheimer is kind of like the spark plug, perhaps, but it did not happen in a vacuum. That all this knowledge.
Didn't it technically happen in a vacuum, though?
Okay, all right. Well, it created a vacuum, yeah. But
little physics joke there.
Yeah, it was. It was a confluence of knowledge, and it was a tipping point where we're learning about nuclear energy, atomic energy, physics, quantum physics. It was all coming together, and so multiple people are working on it, multiple countries at the same time, and so to pin this all on Oppenheimer, he might have been the conductor in this case, but he, whether. Would we not have atomic nuclear weapons if Oppenheimer had never been born? I doubt that. I suspect we would. Just like, like with computers and Facebook or Bill Gates, or, you just EVs, or you just get to those times and points in history where a lot of people are working on, where just things kind of come together and new opportunities arise, and a little catalyst comes in, and you have something profound that changes that. You have this kind of quantum leap in knowledge, and I think that's what you saw here. And as we were going out of the theater, talking to my mom, who was just very disgruntled about the movie because of its kind of portrayal of this bomb ended the war, and we're glorifying war and violence and death, but it's sort of a natural progression of knowledge and learning. It's very, very hard to kind of cap those things and to keep them from continued development, like now with AI. So are we going to, no, we can't do that. It's dangerous. We can't investigate AI. How can you do that? I mean, there's people all around the world that are thinking and working on the same kind of things. And I think it's incumbent on us. Okay, how do we somehow manage it and come together in a societal way to address these issues? And again, thinking about like Physicians for Social Responsibility, one thing you did see in the 70s and 80s were nuclear treaties. So the SALT talks, strategic arms limitation agreements with Russia to try and diminish the risk of nuclear weapons. But to kind of put that genie back in the bottle, really hard once knowledge is out there.
Absolutely. And this actually, while I was doing some research for this, I found this really interesting interview between Stephen Colbert and Neil deGrasse Tyson, where they're talking about Oppenheimer and the very thing you're talking about. So I just want to add this little clip because I think it's an interesting take on it.
Can knowledge ever be a bad thing?
I don't think so.
What about actions that knowledge takes us to? Do you think that Oppenheimer, when the bomb went off, and he said, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds," do you think he perhaps questioned for a moment whether the knowledge they achieved that led to the creation of the bomb perhaps should have been left undiscovered?
Do you know what he said in response to those kinds of questions?
Yes.
He said, because people said, have you usurped the power of God? Have you? And he said, if God didn't want this power to be there, he shouldn't have put it in the atom in the first place. Kind of an interesting point, I think. Well, what he's saying is that the world is accessible to us. So would you say, don't smelt the ore and make iron and make a sword out of it because you could cut yourself? Back then, that's the counterpart statement from the Iron Age. And if you were around back then, you'd be sitting in this chair saying, don't make the sword, because you'd unleash evil on the world.
Okay, I'll step back from don't make the sword. How about don't lick the flagpole in February? You will learn something. You will learn something, but at a price, Neil.
That'd be data. It's a data cost.
It is. Yeah. There is a data cost for that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, Adam and Eve. They ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they paid a price.
Yeah.
So God does put things into atoms he doesn't want us to know about.
That's a perfect Uncle John pun right there.
Hearing that, the one thing that was absolutely missing from that movie was comedy. I don't know if there was a single joke in the whole 3 hours. Jeez.
Yeah.
There was some laughs in our audience. I think Damon got some laughs. Certain line deliveries. But yeah, not too many jokes. There was an apple though, grilling back to the Adam and Eve thing.
Yes.
Oppenheimer poisons an apple that is for his professor because he holds him back from seeing Bohr or a Bohr lecture. And
yes, this was a controversial move because the book that it's based on, American Prometheus, dives into this issue and the rumors around him poisoning this apple of his professor. And there is no hard evidence that he did that. And actually, I just read something on Discussing Film that said that Oppenheimer's grandson said that he liked the movie, but said there's no record of him trying to kill somebody. And that's a serious accusation and historical revision. So, yeah, I mean, obviously he's putting some biblical symbolism into the movie, but it did seem a bit unnecessary. I didn't know what that added to the story of Oppenheimer.
That was my thought. Maybe they're trying to make the point, he's a killer, willing to be a killer, so he doesn't have a problem designing an atomic bomb that kills hundreds of thousands. But yeah, no, I thought that was a stretch. And then he never really get back to it. Does he have this really kind of hateful, malicious component to his personality? You never see that again throughout the movie. So yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
That seems a little bit.
Did they show us cyanide or something, or is it just something that would make it a bad apple?
Yeah.
No. I mean, they literally says on the vial potassium cyanide.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that's
that's a little intense, Oppie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little intense, Nolan. I think your interpretation, John, is probably the thing that he was thinking is just add this element of him being having some murderous, spirit in him. But if you look at any post Hiroshima interviews with Oppenheimer, he is just plagued with guilt. It doesn't seem like he's trying to kill 100,000 people. But I don't know, maybe he was. I mean, certainly have to have some sort of lack of empathy to accept that mission in the first place. If any of us were asked to use our intelligence to develop a mass murdering machine, I wouldn't do it. I don't know about you, but
in addition to being a weapon of mass destruction, it was also really the first utilization of atomic energy. So it was, how do you harness nuclear energy in a way that had never been done before? So it's sort of a practical problem that for the grandest or the most dynamic issue for a physicist to grapple with.
Yeah, there was a little interview clip. I like watched this video about Oppenheimer. Maybe we could play it of Oppenheimer talk, like kind of reflecting upon the use of the atomic bomb. In this clip, he doesn't sound totally wrecked with guilt. It sounds like he's, I don't know. Let's just play it.
Let's see. Yeah.
I think that it probably was assumed. It certainly was always assumed at Los Alamos that if the war were not over and not clearly to be brought to a conclusion by diplomatic means, this weapon would play a part. At the time, the alternative, the campaign of invasion, was certainly much more terrible for everyone concerned. I think that Hiroshima was far more costly in life and suffering and inhumane than it needed to have been an effective argument for ending the war. This is easy to say after the fact.
This feels like he's underplaying it a little bit, but
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, though. And there was that scene with Truman where Truman points out, you developed it, but I pushed the button kind of thing. So
Yeah. That's my favorite scene in the movie, I would say.
yeah, Gary Oldman as Truman. Yeah, that scene's great.
yeah, really sleazy guy. But and
Yeah, I never thought of Truman as being that cold-hearted.
Yeah, no, it was very chilling. But the Nazis killed 6 million Jews, and millions were killed in World War II. And
Oppenheimer was a Jew, which they touch on in the movie.
Many of those scientists were, including Einstein.
It was war, and so what are the rules of war? It feels like, and we see it like with Ukraine and Russia, there's kind of these lines that you're not supposed to cross and a certain etiquette to it. But it's war, and you're trying to kill people and take and to take things away that maybe are not yours. And just terrible stuff. And in that context, did they need to drop the bomb? Where you have other countries trying to pursue the same thing, would they have not used it if they had developed it? Things we probably can't answer, but did you need to drop it? And could you have dropped it somewhere else, or could you have done a smaller one? I mean, just all these kind of different ways to think about it. And so, I think you can't isolate the development of this terrible weapon from the context of what was occurring, and again that it's a war. And there's a lot of Quakerism I totally believe in, and nonviolence is we should be striving for that. But there's also bad actors, bad people in this world, and there has to be some way to kind of some type of police function to maintain order, and there's always going to be elements of judgment and the human factor when thinking about what's right, what's wrong. I thought the movie did a pretty good job of kind of bringing out all the kind of the different aspects and the kind of the moral, ethical issues that folks were wrestling with. And
yeah, it does bring up that Germany was already defeated at this point, and then they're trying to weigh how many lives would be lost if they actually brought soldiers to Japan and tried to finish off the war with Japan that way, and also the Pearl Harbor attack and stuff. So there's all these different factors, and how it went. It is very interesting.
It'd be nice if life was black and white. If life was quantum, it's either 0 or 1 or a positive or negative. But then you have the uncertainty principle, and there's always going to be that kind of element that all these shades of gray, and you wish you could just kind of say, hey, this is absolutely correct, this is absolutely wrong. But to me, it's hard to do that. That there are a lot of complexities to these issues, and again, I thought the movie was good at portraying that in a dramatic fashion.
Just getting into the movie itself now, I think Cillian Murphy's portrayal of Oppenheimer, I think this is maybe the 6th time that Cillian Murphy has worked with Nolan.
But it's the first time he's been the lead of any of his movies. He's always been just a side character, so it's kind of cool to see him get his due as the lead. Yeah, and I would say I think this movie would have taken a huge hit if not for him, and really sinking his soul into this guy and doing a great job of just, because so much of this movie is close-ups on a person's face, and you really need to see the agonizing guilt in his face and, the mixed emotions of the whole operation. And I think that he did a great job with that. Yeah. I saw a TikTok of somebody that worked on the set of Oppenheimer, and they said that Cillian Murphy told everybody to refer to him as Dr. Oppenheimer on set. So he was going full method actor mode, which I thought was interesting. But, he gives a great performance, and there's a lot of great performances in this. It's kind of crazy how many notable actors, the different, a cornucopia of white dudes.
Absolutely.
I made a list. You got a Safdie brother. You got Iron Man. You got the son from Hereditary / Old. You got the bad guy from Stranger Things. You got
not giving them their names.
You got the Green Goblin from the Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans. You got Solo. You got the guy from Pearl Harbor, Josh Hartnett.
Yeah.
Which I didn't even realize he acted anymore. He pulled him out of retirement. I didn't even realize
that was Josh Hartnett. He's one of the main guys. I didn't even recognize him. He's got a little bit more meat on his bones. He's a little older. So
yeah. I think my sister Jasmine had a big crush on him.
Yeah. He was like a 90s, early 2000s heartthrob. The Faculty. He's great in The Faculty.
So I was wondering also, did he have the cocaine bear problem of feeling like they're just throwing too many? It's there's that guy, there's that guy.
Well, funny enough, the guy from Cocaine Bear is in the movie. That's the guy. That's Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich is his name. And you also got Kenneth Branagh in there. Florence Pugh, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. is kind of also pulled him out of a mini retirement because he hasn't been in a movie since Doolittle, the flop, the Dr. Doolittle flop from 2020. And it seemed like maybe he was going to end his career on that, but he got pulled back after he did all of his Iron Man stuff. So it was kind of cool to see Robert Downey Jr. back in a non-Tony Stark role. Like we were talking about Wes Anderson, he's just the kind of director that he could just get anybody he wants, it seems like. And even the tiniest of roles, he'll put a great actor in there. So it was kind of fun to see all these different actors that you recognize from weird different places.
Do you like Matt Damon, Uncle John?
Well, I liked him in this role. I mean, it was sort of a stereotypical in a way, the gruff but good-hearted military type, and so
he stuck up for Oppenheimer during the whole investigation.
So he had his principles and kind of stuck to him and was loyal.
I guess I thought some of Matt Damon's deliveries are a little over the top. Where he's like, "This is the most important goddamn thing in the world." All right. We get it.
I like Damon in it. I thought he was one of the more relatable characters, because everyone else is super smart scientist type. So he's this more down to earth kind of guy. He's all right, if I'm a scene with this guy, I at least know what's going on a little bit. He's speaking in my language.
General Groves, is who he plays, was an engineer, and they kind of allude to it, but he built the Pentagon, so he was no slouch himself. What did we think about the inclusion of Albert Einstein as a character here?
Well, they kind of brought it full circle at the end, but it up until the very end, it didn't seem like it was that relevant. And that whole last half of the movie, after the bomb dropped, they had this whole other section about Struss, and the movie was really more about Struss. It feels like kind of a detour, really, but from the main.
Yeah, I agree.
From the main theme, but
I think the second half of this movie is very, very downhill.
Yeah, they could have cut it.
Yeah,
or it's like the last third, maybe, or something. But
yeah. That last hour is such a drag, such a drag.
Because the movie's playing on these 3 different timelines, like the making the Manhattan Project timeline.
Yeah,
which is the most interesting stuff, I would say.
Yeah,
and then you got like another time period, which is like what do you call, like the investigation into Oppenheimer, and then you got like a few years later after that, which is like Strauss's like confirmation hearing or something like that.
Yeah, he was trying to be the Secretary of Commerce, right, or something like that. Yeah,
and definitely all the Strauss stuff. It just it had way less juice to it. I was much less invested in it. I mean, there's some interesting stuff to pull from it, but they definitely could have spent a lot less time on it. And it also felt like it was kind of confusing, like at the beginning of the movie, to be cutting that stuff in. It's like I don't really need to be knowing this stuff yet. Like, it's just kind of confusing the movie at this point.
Totally.
Like, I just want to be like, stick to one time period, and like let's just like focus on telling that story before you're introducing this other element, this less interesting element of his life.
Yeah, it's sort of a petty storyline compared to these really kind of war and peace kind of what's the meaning of life kind of issues that are raised by the dropping of the nuclear atomic bomb. And
I think that it's important, I guess, the aftermath, Oppenheimer's own fallout from post Hiroshima, of him becoming famous, of him getting a lot more scrutiny, not only in the public eye, but within government. And then these interrogations, I guess, is important to his life. And I guess it left a big black stain on his legacy.
And he lost that security clearance.
Oh, no. Oh, no, not the security clearance. Like, I'm just like, wait, this is what this was all about? And they keep kind of like teasing it. Like, it's like, this is not a court hearing. This is not a court hearing. We're just like asking questions here. And it's like, okay, then what is it? And then at the very end, it's like, we're revoking your clearance. And it's like, that's it?
Yeah. That's the climax here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you just literally dropped the nuclear bomb on this movie.
Right.
And it's like, you're going to try to blow our minds with him losing his clearance? Like, I'm just like, you should have ended the movie like fucking an hour and a half ago, man.
Yeah.
Well,
and they could have connected it to McCarthyism and the communists, the connection to that communism. But what didn't really do that? But that was a whole nother movie.
It's like, if you're gonna go for it, fucking go for it. I totally agree with you, Zach. The way that the movie was cut in the very beginning, it was very confusing. But in classic Nolan, obsessed with time jumping, he had to put his signature on this. And so the way I felt like he was building it thematically, when I was first watching the first hour, I thought it was quite brilliant, because I was like, oh, we're going to end with the Trinity test. And you see like these two sides of history kind of converging on Los Alamos. And then it's like, boom, we get the explosion and roll credits. And I saw that kind of happening like up until the Trinity test. And I literally, after the explosion and they started going into some other things, I like readjusted my seat and I like turned to Drew, because we were going to hit Barbie like right after the movie, and I was like, get your stuff together because the movie's gonna end soon, and we gotta run out of here and go to Barbie. And I pulled my bag up and I look at the phone. I'm like, it's like the movie started at noon. It was like 2:15. I was like, wait, there's gonna be at least another hour of this. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And then so I was just like, I was so like, I can't believe I'm going to sit here for another hour. And then it just kept going with the interrogation stuff. It's like, why did you waste so many miles of IMAX film on like men in rooms talking in black and white? That was when I was just like, okay, I'm so checked out on this movie. Like, I can't believe he sucked me in for this, elevated Law and Order episode.
Yeah, because at the beginning when it's cutting between the stuff, like it is confusing, but it is like kind of like making me like kind of like sit up in my seat and like pay more attention. It's like okay, it's like I gotta focus here because there's like different timelines going on, and it's like it's kind of interesting. And I think the way the music in this movie I think is really good. That was like something that
it does a lot of legwork in this movie.
Propelling you forward and like making like some like gluing together these timelines. And so like the way that was working in the first hour or so I thought was really cool. But then you kind of lose all that near the last chunk of it, which is too bad. It seemed like it was trying to say like maybe Oppenheimer's like kind of enjoying like that he like feels like he deserves like some punishment or something for like what he's done, so like that's why he's like allowing to be tarred and feathered, as Emily Blunt puts it, in this investigation. So I mean that was like kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah, but it really undercut the bigger themes that were that were central to the movie up until that point.
And then he tries to wrap it back around in the end with Einstein and like that maybe I did set off a chain reaction that will destroy the world. And then in that third act too, the heavy-handedness of like where we are in history when the guy's like the cocaine bear guy, Han Solo, is like, oh, there is one comment from a junior senator from Massachusetts, last name Kennedy, first name John F. Ever heard of him? Like it's just like okay,
to be continued. Yeah,
it's like at the end of the Dark Knight, another Christopher Nolan movie where like is like, and he left his card, and it's the Joker card kind of moment.
There were a couple other kind of
groaners,
dead ends, or like the distinction between the A bomb and the H bomb, and how this was a big source of controversy. It seemed like kind of a fine distinction that again kind of took away from the central theme of how do you harness something that can be powerful and positive, and instead use it for negative, evil things, whether it's an A bomb or an H bomb. It was really kind of irrelevant to the basic story. But
I did think that was a little interesting, though, that like they were toying with the idea of a much more destructive bomb.
Yeah, and Oppenheimer was against the hydrogen bomb, right?
Yeah,
the bigger issues is the bomb and unlocking the power of the atom, and both their variations on a theme, and so we didn't do it for this World War II, but it's ready for World War III. And
I did like the kind of final ending with Einstein though, because like they keep showing like this scene of like them by the pond where Einstein's hat blows off and all this, but you're seeing it from a distance, and there's all this mystery of like what was their conversation about, and like you're as an audience member like, all right, I guess I am kind of curious what they're talking about. And Robert Downey Jr.'s character has this feeling like that they were talking about him, and that Oppenheimer was like putting like some words against Strauss and Einstein's ear, and that's his whole theory. And then there's that line, it's like, oh, they're just talking about not you at all, maybe something more important. And then like they show it, and they're kind of talking about the bomb, and how like Oppenheimer will probably get awarded at some point, and it won't really, the award, they'll say that you're forgiven, but they're not really saying it to you. They're saying it to themselves or something.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like an interesting line. And then yeah, it did bring back the theme of the movie and the whole bomb aspect, and you get the apocalyptic imagery of like the whole world like catching on fire. And I did find it an effective kind of mic drop ending. And I like that it didn't do the biopic-y type ending thing where it's like it shows like the characters and what happened to them after the movie with like, the text kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it didn't do that, which I liked. Is like that's it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And I did find that a powerful ending.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I wish they would have just cut out all of that procedural court drama stuff and just come back to the central theme like you're talking about, John. And they could have just wrapped it up with that message a lot earlier.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The other with Einstein was kind of, and you saw those shots of him by the pond, and he was like a has-been, and then that's, to me, that's the other thing I got about his last, the actual discussion is, well, when they give you the award, that means you're done, kind of thing. It's like passing of the torch, and now let the new folks kind of come in. So this is goodbye and move on, and thank you for your service. And yeah, someone nearing the age of retirement, that part kind of struck home as well.
But I just wonder, in terms of the third hour of the film and adding all that extra stuff, if Christopher Nolan was just really trying to honor the text that it was all based on, like this book, American Prometheus, which I think is like a 700-page book. And I'm sure, the last 300 pages are probably all about this stuff. And so Christopher Nolan, being so tied to the hip of the author, being like, well, I guess we got to kind of talk about, the other half of this book.
Yeah.
So maybe he was kind of in a pickle there. Maybe he would have liked to stick with the atomic bomb stuff.
It's amazing that audiences are still going, because the last hour was kind of agonizing, and yet it's still so very, very popular. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you like Robert Downey Jr., you get a lot of him in the last hour, so that's something. Sure. Another thing is, the use of like switching between color and black and white film. I read that the idea behind Christopher Nolan's idea behind this was that all the black and white footage is supposed to represent objective reality, and then all the color stuff is subjective from Oppenheimer's perspective. So like that's why like what in some of the color scenes, like you'll see like the background shaking, or when he's seeing like visions of the bomb and stuff, like that's all in color because like we're kind of inside Oppenheimer's mind. But when it's black and white, that's like, this isn't from Oppenheimer's perspective. This is just like more objectively what happened.
Right.
Which I think is kind of interesting, but the movie doesn't do a good job of telling you that's what's happening.
And it reminded me of black and white films and seeing newscasts, newsreels in that black and white. And that part I liked, particularly at the beginning, where it just felt gritty and real and reminded me of my past. And going to the movies and seeing clips that they would show news at the beginning of movies, this is what's happening around the world in that grainy kind of film. And
I was just gonna say, this whole movie was shot on IMAX cameras, and this is also the first movie to ever shoot black and white IMAX, which it's kind of
65 millimeter black and white celluloid. And we should talk about how the full IMAX print film reel of this film is 11 miles long and weighs 600 pounds.
Wow. And you saw it in IMAX, right, Austin?
Well, so we didn't really talk about my whole film going experience, which was an experience.
Yeah, dig into that.
Yeah, so Drew and I drove out to Batavia, Illinois, to the new Imagine Theaters, spelled with an E. It was all over the news in the last couple weeks. They opened up what they call the biggest screen in Illinois. It's 96 feet wide and is gigantic. Big auditorium with about 50 speakers just all over the ceiling and walls. And the seats were really nice. They were like, Drew described them as really nice car seats.
Did they recline?
They reclined all the way back and they had temperature control in them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a comfortable experience.
Were there a lot of people at Oppenheimer? Or
Yeah, this was a noon showing on a Wednesday, and yeah, it was an older crowd, but I would say it was about half filled. And yeah, so it was in a premium large format, which is called the Super EDX at this place. But I think it was just a giant projection. You know, I don't think there was anything. I think it was just like laser, digital cinema projection. I don't think there was anything special about it. I don't think it was on film. I don't think it was 70 millimeter. I just kind of was getting overwhelmed with the options and the right way to watch this movie. And I was just like, well, I want to see this theater. And I guess I might as well do my Barbenheimer, drive an hour and a half away to do my Barbenheimer experience at the biggest screen in Illinois and just see how that is. And yeah, I mean, it was a remarkable screen.
how was the sound?
It was loud, especially in the very beginning when they're just like really inundating you with like the sound of an explosion, and then like all those abstract cut scenes where it's really loud, and the Trinity test itself, the bass and the sound was so viscerally loud, like you could just feel it in your skin, just rattling the whole auditorium. But I think that was to the cost of the dialogue. And so if there was any music behind them talking, it kind of drowned out the dialogue. So I did miss some dialogue, which is whatever. It's kind of a gamble with this stuff. It's like, I was so anxious trying to figure out the right way to watch this movie, because it was like, you see it projected at Music Box, but the sound might not be so great. And it's like, but if you see it projected in another theater, make sure it's like a good projectionist, because the projection couldn't be right. And some IMAX screens are quote unquote LIMAX screens. It's just like, they're just big screens. They're not like the wraparound screens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. I was just like, I'm just going to go to this place and see how it would say I was impressed with the IMAX screen that we went to, John. You could see the curvature of the screen, and we were pretty close to the screen as well, so it really kind of enveloped us. Nice.
And it sounded really good, though I will admit I feel like there's some sound mixing issues, because there were just some lines that just get lost in the shuffle.
Okay, so that was you too.
Yeah, but partly related to the dialogue itself. I mean, so there was some kind of scientific jargon that they were throwing in there, and so you wanted to pick up on it, and it got lost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the movie doesn't. It just expects the audience to keep up. It's not going to really explain. It's not going to break it down for you like Adam McKay might or something. It's just like it's just going to keep moving. We're not going to explain all these sciencey concepts which I kind of like, but yeah, there's definitely some confusion to be had, but you just kind of got to roll with it.
I liked the scenes where he was teaching. I thought that was kind of an effective little segment of the movie, and just the way he engaged the pupils and was able to explain things in a way that that others could understand it.
And then we had what I thought to be some unnecessary sex scenes with Florence Pugh.
You didn't like those?
I mean, well, Florence Pugh is gorgeous, and so, no problems there, but they're literally having sex, and then she makes him read a passage of Sanskrit. It's like, I don't know. And then that whole fantasy of him having, or her having sex with him in the interrogation room, and like he's just naked. It's like, what are you trying to tell me here, Nolan? That like,
I thought that bit, the fantasy bit, was kind of effective, because I don't know, kind of gets into the subjective side of his mind, of like they're bringing up this affair in front of his wife. Emily Blunt's like sitting right behind him.
Yeah,
So
but isn't that supposed to be
he's-
Emily Blunt's fantasy? Like, is she envisioning? Because Florence Pugh is like looking at her in the fantasy. So is that Emily Blunt's fantasy or hallucination? I don't know.
Well, I think Christopher Nolan would say it's Oppenheimer's fantasy because he's feeling very self-conscious of the fact that, like, oh my God, my wife is hearing this. I'm feeling extremely vulnerable, naked as he is.
Yeah.
And so, like,
that's what I interpreted it.
like having to hear that in that setting with his wife right behind him, like it just makes him feel guilty about his affair, I think. So I think it was a little heavy-handed, but I think kind of effective.
Yeah, and like the Sanskrit seemed kind of silly in the context, but yeah, he could multitask. Let's put it that way.
Doesn't he say, I am destroyer of whatever that quote is? Like,
I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Like,
yeah, he says that line while she's mounting him. Yeah, it's definitely a weird scene, for sure.
well,
Final thoughts, maybe, or if there's any other scenes you want to point out.
Well, the other part that was just interesting was just, how brilliant he was, and like when he speaks Danish, he picked it up in 6 weeks, and that to me that's fascinating. That people are just that intellectually brilliant, and how do you capture that? So I enjoyed that part of it.
yeah.
But yeah, definitely the Trinity test scene that sticks out as a really effective, a cinematic thing, and I like how they take out the sound, like, or it's just like you just like hear breathing, and you're just like seeing these intense white flashes and everybody's reaction, but it's just like it's like you can hear a pin drop kind of effect, and
Yeah.
I thought that was really effective use of sound. And then eventually you do kind of hear the blasts, but it's just like a good while of just like kind of living in silence and breathing while seeing these bombs. Like, I thought that was very effective and really cool. Definitely a highlight of the movie.
Yeah, and I would just say, going off that, the sound design of that, he does such a good job of priming you throughout the movie about the volume of the explosion, and kind of prepping you from the very beginning of like how loud it is. And so when the bomb does go off and it's so silent, I was feeling so tense because I'm like, when are we going to hear the blast come, and how loud is that going to be? So I almost like had my hands close to my ears, like ready to like close my ears myself, like waiting for the blast. So it's like I was really wrapped in that moment.
Yeah, everyone putting on those cool sunglasses, and
Ben Safdie looks amazing.
Yeah, he has a little smile
with the sunscreen all over his face, and that's like an iconic cinematic image. I think like that's gonna be long lasting.
Yeah, and also just like everybody kind of like cheering afterwards. Like it's it definitely gives you kind of that weird feeling, kind of like you're talking about on the cruise when the iceberg fell in and everyone's like laughing and cheering, and it's like this is like apocalyptic, but you guys are having a great time.
Yeah, it is. It's sick. There's a lot of mixed feelings, to say the least.
Well, and then afterwards, when he's speaking, kind of celebratory meeting with all the folks who work there, and everyone's kind of the American jingoism, and we won, and he totally feeding into that, and you didn't see the conflict that he displayed at other points in the movie.
Like that's when we get the little
like the skin peeling.
Yeah, seeing like some of the nuclear effects on bodies and stuff, like seeing the carnage. So yeah, and it is like pretty sick when he's like, I wish we could have just dropped it on the Germans. It's like I wish we killed more people. Like
right.
I wonder if he actually did say that. But yeah, I thought that was an effective scene as well. Oh yeah, they also threw Casey Affleck in there. What was up with that?
Oh yeah, he was in there too. Yeah, there's a lot of just like, oh, it's that guy and that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I did think he did a good job of casting people with very distinctive faces. Like
Mhm.
I felt like everybody's face was kind of instantly recognizable.
Yeah,
Like,
Benny Safdie plays Edward Teller. And if you look at a picture of Edward Teller, he does kind of have like a softy face. So I mean, it's like it is pretty good casting, I think. And Cillian Murphy, if you look at these pictures of Oppenheimer, I mean, we're looking at one
Yeah.
right now. I mean, like he does have that kind of similar physique, that like
yeah, the
kind of
gaunt face.
yeah,
Mhm.
the really tight skin and like distinctive jawline.
Yeah, I thought it was a good movie. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I don't think it's great, but I thought it was pretty compelling. Definitely flawed, but I liked it.
Is that your final thought?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically. I think I said oh, I do want to say as soon as we left the movie theater, this thunderstorm, lightning storm is going on, and there as soon as we left the theater, there's this incredible strike of lightning,
Oh, wow.
and it just
Yeah.
like kind of added to the apocalyptic feel that the movie ends on, and then there's just like lightning, and I was like,
Wow.
I think I'll always remember that. That was really cool.
Yeah, that
Wow.
was powerful. Well, I enjoyed it. I guess enjoy is the wrong word, but it definitely kept me engaged until that last part. It just felt like so anticlimactic. Why are we worrying about stress when we're talking about the potential end of the world and unleashing
Yeah.
these massive powers? And it was confusing in terms of how the senators and how they were, were they opposed because they were McCarthyites or because they were anti-communist or because they didn't like Struce, or it was just it really got kind of mashed up there. So to me,
Or legitimate concerns that, he may have given plans to the Soviets.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that so they brought that out at the end that one of the people he hired was a spy. I didn't know that, and that was just kind of a throwaway line, at the end.
Yeah.
But no, it made me think, and I'm glad that they're talking about atomic bombs and nuclear war and how to wrestling with the issues of war and peace, and so I'm glad we're thinking about that these days. We see what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and my dad mentioned the nuclear the time clock or the doomsday clock, and we're 90 seconds away right now or whatever. And yeah, you can imagine it. It's like is Russia willing to lose? I mean, if they really backs were against the wall, would they not use a nuclear weapon? So to at least remind ourselves that, hey, this is very real, and America has a lot of responsibility in trying to ensure that future generations will be able to survive. So
Yeah.
those are themes that are not commonly brought out in movies, and so that thought provoking, and so yeah, glad I went. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Uncle John. Yeah. And just what you said about the doomsday clock, I just looked it up. If you look up the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, they say a time of unprecedented danger is 90 seconds away. 90 seconds to midnight, they say. And I guess this Bulletin of Atomic Scientists was founded by Albert Einstein at the University of Chicago. And so it is good that we have a movie like this, I think, in this time where nuclear destruction is being talked about on a daily basis in terms of the Ukraine war and Russia and America's response and Iran. And, there are a lot of people out there with a lot of bombs, and we could destroy the world very easily at a moment's notice.
Good reminder.
Yeah, good reminder.
Yeah, the thought that we can protect ourselves. One of the themes was kind of this escalation. So A bomb, then to H bomb, and then they're going to build some more, and then we're going to build some more, and then the anti-ballistic missiles. Well, we'll just shoot them all down, and it just seems so impossible. Getting back to Physicians for Social Responsibility for just a minute. In the 70s, I guess it was 80s, Reagan proposed this Star Wars shield, the anti-ballistic missile system that was supposedly we'd be safe, wouldn't have to worry about it. And it just seems so ludicrous to think that we are going to build a system that would protect us against nuclear weapons. And the PSR sold an umbrella, that the Star Wars umbrella. And so it's an umbrella that's black, but with all these transparent polka dots throughout it. It's kind of symbolize that you really can't protect yourself entirely. And boy, you see it now with drones. I mean, there's just always these new developments that are out there to increase the danger. And we need to be working as hard on building social systems and thinking more globally to counter this. So
yeah,
dangerous time.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk now in the news about how if Russia was to use a nuclear bomb, it would just be a tactical nuclear bomb. It wouldn't be like an A bomb, wouldn't be Hiroshima, but it's like, it's still a nuclear bomb, you can't really degrade it.
No.
But as for the movie itself, I would say I'm more on the side of disliking it than liking it. Although everything we said, I do respect it. I respect the filmmaking. I respect the acting. I think that some of the editing is really cool. I think the Trinity test scene is going to be a cinematic moment that people will remember for a really long time. But I would say the best depiction of the Trinity test was filmed by Mr. David Lynch in Twin Peaks: The Return, episode 8. If you go to about 16 minutes in, he has a incredible 4-minute sequence that starts with the Los Alamos landscape, and the bomb goes off, and these very abstract, noisy strings come in, and you slowly zoom into the cloud, and you go into the atomic cloud, and it's just basically the kind of stuff that we see in this movie, Oppenheimer, of those abstract like particles and waves and like the loud noises. David Lynch did this 5 years ago in a much more effective way, I think. So I would encourage everybody, if you really want to see a very palpable but more abstract way of depicting the atomic bomb, check that episode out of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I need to rewatch that.
So I would say I didn't love it. I think that the court procedural stuff is agonizing. I was so bored this last half of the movie. Everything pretty much after the Trinity drop, I was just like, get me out of the theater. Like the second the credits hit, I just was like, I grabbed my bag and left. I did not like that.
So why is it so popular? A 3-hour movie, a biopic, and it has that hour and a hour that's a throwaway almost. It's like, well, so why is it still so acclaimed and so many people are still seeing it?
I think it's the Christopher Nolan name. He's just one of those film directors that film bros love, because he made the Batman trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, which gave him huge acclaim. Everyone loves The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as the Joker and all that. And he's made Inception. So he's made these big blockbusters that people love, Interstellar, Tenet. So I think
riding his own coattails.
Yeah. So people just have a lot of anticipation, whatever his next project's going to be. And there's just an effective marketing campaign behind this thing that made people want to go see it.
And honestly, I think that the whole Barbenheimer thing was to their great benefit, because the origins of the Barbenheimer was just simply the fact that they were coming out on the same day, and they were both highly anticipated films. And there was some push from Warner Brothers to separate the release of the films, but Christopher Nolan refused. So it's like, ooh, who's going to win the box office that week, Oppenheimer or Barbie? I think that if it wasn't for that little competitive nature of this made up rivalry between the two, I don't think this movie would have had the fandom that it got.
Yeah, it fed off each other.
Yeah, because it got caught up in this whole Barbenheimer thing, which, Zach, you can attest to this. We came up with the name Barbenheimer in like March.
All right.
We were talking about future episodes. We were talking about the summer movies. We were talking about the fact that Barbie and Oppenheimer were coming on the same day, and maybe we'll do an episode of the two of them. And as you can see in our episodes, we're always kind of mashing together two names of the movies that we review. And you know, we were way ahead of the curve on the name Barbieheimer. So
yeah, what can I say? We're brilliant.
We're basically Oppenheimers of the podcast world.
We're so
Poddenheimers.
If only people could understand your Sanskrit, you'd be sad. Yeah.
Yes, we do offer a transcript of these podcasts in Sanskrit for whoever's interested. My last thing that I'll say though is I think that the Albert Einstein stuff was very funny. Like I was just like, the fuck is Albert Einstein doing? It's like obviously he played a prominent role in this moment in history, but the fact that he's just like the wind blows off his hat like all silly like, and then like there's a scene where it's just like a car pulls out and then like it just reveals Albert Einstein. He just kind of waddles up through the grass like it's just like emerging from the forest like some sort of creature. Like I just thought it was very silly and definitely took me out of it.
Yeah, Einstein's such as like he just feels like a cartoon character. He doesn't even feel real. So just like putting him in a movie like this, there's I don't know, it's kind of like Archimedes showing up in Indiana Jones. It just feels a little weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately I did like the final scene with Einstein, but I feel like the instances used of him before were maybe unnecessary.
Yeah,
but
no, I think it's a good payoff. I think, but just the way that he's kind of revealed and it's like, oh, it's Einstein. It's like, I don't know. I just thought it was a little silly.
Yeah, I should wrap this boy up.
Yeah, thanks, Uncle John, for coming on for this. I think
Hey, thanks for having me.
You know, we know you originally wanted to do When Harry Met Sally, which we can still do.
Yeah, I'd like to do it at some point.
But I thought this was a great movie for you because I thought you had some real amazing insight to put on this film in terms of the anti-war movement and the science itself. So thank you for your expertise.
Yeah, well, it was a great suggestion. And actually, I watched When Harry Met Sally again. And you know what I liked about it is Billy Crystal, basically. I just think he's very funny, and the way he talks and his jokes and his expressions. And
you're kind of a Billy Crystal type guy.
You strip all that away, and there's not a whole lot, but fun scenes in Chicago, etc. But yeah, this was a much more meaty discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you have nothing in your career that fills you as much regret as Oppenheimer does with the bomb.
Yeah,
doctor careers.
No, you're a good doctor. And speaking of the good doctor, there's one other clip from Grandpa that's pretty sweet that goes back to what you were saying about his belief in Quakerism and how it relates to the bomb. And this is one of my favorite things that Grandpa's ever said, or at least that we have committed to tape here. So let's just play this out a little bit.
Well, I do have some kind of religious feelings. I feel like I don't have a sense of God, but why I think I'm, although again, Ruth led me to, no, I went to college at a Quaker college, but Ruth actually joined the Society of Friends. And one of the things that Friends believe in is that there's that of God in every man. It's a main premise. I don't have that, but I know I always have felt that there's something good in just about everybody. That's been pretty clear to me. And I do feel that way. I don't only feel that way, I believe it. If anything, I've been impressed by people and their goodness. I know there are a lot of bad things, but I think I'm always expecting that in people.
So you have an optimistic view of the future.
I think that would be certainly an optimistic view of humankind, but you know, one or two atomic bombs could make a big difference.
The ultimate mic drop. There you go. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Uncle John, and thank you for listening to Film with Family. Next week we will be talking about Barbie, so hang on to your hats for that one.
But yeah, in the meantime, like the podcast, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And also you can follow us, me and Austin, on Letterboxd. Zachary Zweifler, Austin C. Pruett are our handles.
And if you want to send us an email, you can send us an email at filmwithfamilypodcast@gmail.com.
We love our family.
And we love the movies. Love you, Uncle John.
Love you guys. That was great. And you do a super job and illuminate a lot of things, and you bring our family together. Thank you.
Aw, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time.